Dominic Hayes approached his seat with calm precision, briefcase in hand, ready for what should have been a route in flight. But before he could set down his bag, a sharp voice cut through the quiet. Using this road to sleep, the woman snapped, throwing her lavender blanket over both seats as if marking territory. Her eyes flicked up with Asmeg's smile. Surely you can find somewhere else if you even have a Dominic's voice stayed steady, but inside a storm was brewing. This is me seat, he said, holding up his boarding pass. She barely glanced at it. You must be mistaken, she hissed. People like me need space. You'll have to move around them. The cabin held its breath. Whispers spread, phones subtly raised. No one spoke, but the tension was electric, a silent battle for respect playing out in the quiet luxury of first class. This wasn't just a seat dispute. This was power, pride, and dignity colliding at 30,000 feet, and Dominic Hayes wasn't just any passenger. He was the man who controlled the very airline they were on. What happens when the quietsman refuses to move? Hit that like button, subscribe to real life stories new, and stay tuned, because this fight for respect is about to ground the whole flight. Dominic stood firm, his gazoon wavering as Karen's defiant smile flickered, threatening to ignite the simmering tension in the first-class cabin. The lavender blanket stretched across both seats, like a territory one that Dominic had every right to reclaim. Please, Miss Clothed flight attendant whispered cautiously, stepping between them. Wearily need to follow seat assignment. Scowled. You, Karen, cut her off, voice sharpened, clipped. I've explained I have a medical condition. This is my space. Fourth, next 5 hours, passengers around shifted uncomfortably, phone settlers capturing every word. The weight of entitlement hung thick in the air, crushing the quiet dignity Dominic carried. He raised his boarding pass again. My ticket is for seat nay. I need to sit there. Karen's lips curled into a mocking sneer. You're asking me to move because of you people like me, Aero used to a certain standard? I'm not leaving. The cabin's murmurs grew louder, anxiety mixing with curiosity. Donics.com exterior masked. The man in the navy suit was Morathon, a passenger. He was the silent heartbeat of the airline they all depended on. Chloe exchanged a glance with Marcus, the purser. We're trying to solve this, Marcus said quietly, but Karen's refusal locked the cabin in Aston still. Dominic stepped back, his voice low but steady. Then we wait. That clock ticked mercilessly. 7 minutes stretched like an eternity. Karen reclined her seat, fully adjusting the blanket and pillow as if to stake her claim deeper. But the atmosphere, shifting eyes no longer followed her but lingered on Dominic. The passenger space was thinning. One whispered to Anathor, isn't that Dominic Hayes, the CEO of Vanguard Aero? The realization rippled across the cabin like wildfire. Woman who had so confidently dismissed him now sat uncomfortably in the spotlight. Back in the galley, phone vibrated. A secure message. Protocol Raven initiated. Has mauled faintly. The calm before the storming. The operations center, thousands off miles away. A team of engineers monitored. Flight lights flickered, dashboards flicked, and subtle disruptions began to ripple through the airline's network. Boarding gates stalled. Crew scheduling doll, triggered by one man's refusal to back down on board. Karen's confidence began to falter. Her fingers trembled slightly as she reached for her phone, but the connection was gone. Through a fee signal dropped as if the very skis were pushing back against her. Wasn't the Wi-Fi working? She hissed to Chloe. Intermittent disruptions, ma'am, Chloe replied, evenly avoiding eye contact. Karen Rose's voice sharp and demanding. I want off this plane. No. Marcus stepped forward calmly. Ma'am, please remain seated. We're under restricted movement until further notice, sir. Glare froze, frustration mounting. The subtle shift in power was unmistakable. Cabin no longer orbited around her will. Dominic watched quietly, his presence a quiet force that needed raised voice. The crew moved with a newfound resolve, their interaction stinged with a professionalism born from corporate backing and the weight of accountability. The whispers turned into conversations into calls for answers. Is this delay really because F her? A man in 2A asked. No, a woman in 2F answered firmly. It's because of watch. Did Karen's defiant stance crumbled further when the captain's voice over the intercom, ladies and gentlemen, due to operational review, the current flight crew will temporarily barb. We ask for your patience and cooperation. The announcement sent a wave of disbelief through the cab. Passengers exchanged glances, some discreetly filming, others simply observing the unprecedented scene unfolding. Karen shouted, this is because of him, because of that man. But that crowd was no longer on her side. Voice rose in disagreement. You threw your blanket over 2 seats and refused to move. A man retorted, it's not a Boutoni seat. Another added, it's a boot respect. In the galley, Brian Aero, the VP of Corporate Risk, arrived, swiftly briefing the crew and overseeing the situation, ordered the cabin door reopened, and Karen escorted back to her seat. "Return your seat, ma'am," he instructed firmly. Karen's jaw tightened. She sat silently, the earlier arrogance. "Replaced be quiet defeat." Dominic resumed helpless in seat 1E. The once empty seat beside him, now his, again, the cabinets hauled outside the plane. Systems glitches escalated at key. Airports nationwide boarding delays, multi-fleet flight schedules faltered, and invisible airpole turning into a wave back on Theplane. Dominic's tablet glowed with real-time updates. Social media buzzing news feeds alive with hashtags like #Flight3921 and #DignitySky. Passengers leaned in captivated not just by the drama, but by the message. "A young woman whispered to her neighbor. He didn't yell, didn't fight. But he changed everything." The truth was clear: dignity doesn't need volume to be powerful. Karen's attempt to reclaim control faltered. Her phone calls, 2 lawyers, went unanswered. Her public outbursts met with silence. The cabin crew, now led by a new culture of respect under Chloe's direction, moved with purpose. Flyers, dignity scores, and transparent accountability were no longer empty promises. As the engine's finale roared to life, the plane pushed. But what truly took off was a movement. Dominic Hayes had turned one quiet act into a reckoning. Passengers sobbed softly, their claps, not for Thepalot, but for the man who reminded them that respect is a right, not a privilege. Karen's legal threats dissolved into whispers. Law firms distanced themselves. Sure, reputation tarnished beyond repair. Months later, Vanguard Aero's policies led the industry. Transparent dignity score, anonymous feedback channels, mandatory crew training, all born from the stand. On that flight, Dominic declined every award, choosing instead to fly coach, blending into the crowd. His fight wise, never for glory but for change, and for Karen Whitmore. The courtroom became her final stage where her claims unraveled. Accountability was enforced, and her entitled reign was ended. Vesky's remembered the quiet stand taken that day, echoing silently across thousands of flights. Dominic Hayes never sought to be a hero, he just refused. Tobe moved because sometimes the quiet voices carry the strongest power. As the aircraft finally lifted off the ground, Aquiot transformation settled over everyone aboard. The tension that had gripped the cabin only hours before had softened into a collective understanding that respect isn't just a courtesy, but a fundamental right, one that must never be ignored or taken for granted. Dominic Hayes sat calmly, his gaze steady but reflective. This wasn't simply a victory over one person's arrogance, it was armament that revealed how entrenched attitudes can quietly undermine dignity, and how courage, even in silence, can challenge those patterns. Realized that real change didn't come from loud protests or dramatic infractions. Instead, it grew from steadfast patience, from unwavered principle held in moments when no one was watching, and from the refusal to accept anything less than fairness. This was not just about a seat on a plane, it was about reclaiming humanity in space, where entitlement too often rules around him. Passengers exchanged glances, some subtly, others quietly, expressing relief that dignity had found a champion. The woman who had once claimed to seat sat alone, now her confidence replaced by uneasy silence, a silent reckoning. Her privilege was no longer a shield. Back on the ground, changes were already underway, policies revamped, crew training reimagined, and a culture of accountability blossomed within the airline. The ripple effect of this single flight extended far beyond the terminal line, spearing conversations about equal respect in countless everyday interactions. Dominic understood this journey was far from over. The fight for dignity required constant vigilance and compassion. But today, a seed was planted, a reminder that standing firm with quiet strength can reshape even the most rigid systems. As the sun set beyond the horizon, casting a warm glow over the city skyline, Dominic folded a simple boarding pass and placed it gently on his desk, a symbol of the stand, take an Aquio testament to change. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe to Real Life Stories New. Join us as we uncover more journeys of courage, resilience, and the power of quiet conviction. Help us reach 100,000 subscribers and be part of a community that believes dignity flies first.